And with that, Houseki no Kuni, Land of the Lustrous, comes to a close. Words cannot describe how sad I am that this series that I've loved for this long, 3 months now, is going away. But unlike Made in Abyss from the previous season, I'm not left with this feeling of contentment. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like Phos, after this episode, I too feel that desire to learn the answers, to learn about what's going on in this story and in this world. It's such an interesting approach to this structure and to this story to end it like they did in this episode. And we will talk about it, but I think above all, the feeling it leaves me with is that desire to learn more, to gain that knowledge. So if they were making me want to go read the manga, mission accomplished. And we'll talk about manga reviews, but I'll save that for the end. Hello everybody, I am PhenomSage, and welcome back to another, the final Houseki no Kuni, Land of the Lustrous review, at least for Season 1, new work. Now before we get into just everything that I want to talk about in this episode, just cover everything that's just so intriguing and beautiful to me, I just want to cover some bases real quick. For one, I really like how that intro came out. Oh man, that's some of the best editing I've ever done. Not to toot my own horn, but just seriously, I really love how that intro turned out. And originally I was only going to make it like what I did for the Made in Abyss finale, just a short little intro sequence to reflect on our adventures and get hyped up for this finale review. But it ended up just turning into just this way bigger project that I wanted to work on. I spent the last 2 days just pretty much non-stop working on it, editing, doing post stuff. It was really arduous work, but it really paid off in my opinion. And I do have to give a special shout out to Nullgator on Twitter. He told me 2 days ago that this OST, the first 15 tracks of the soundtrack, had been bundled with the manga, and thanks to him I was able to make that intro and also include some tracks in this review, which I'm very happy about, and I'm happy that I found out back then, so that way I had the time to edit all of that intro and listen to the tracks in my spare time. They are amazing, and I can't wait for that full soundtrack release. But again, thank you to Nullgator for letting me know about that. Anyways, about that intro, I think I'm going to upload that separately as its own separate AMV type video, because it basically turned into a mini AMV of sorts, and I haven't made an AMV in a while, so I'm just gonna upload that separately for the fun of it. I'm just happy that I think I made a video that is unspoilery enough that I can show it to anybody who's on the fence about Houseki no Kuni and hopefully get them interested in checking out the show. On the topic of shoutouts, I really need to shout out some of the fan art and just art in general that people are sending me because of this review series. It is so cool. I never thought that anybody would try and draw things from my reviews, especially some of the stupid stuff that I put up. But for one, I have to give this incredible shout out to Terrifier Knight on Twitter. I'm linking their DeviantArt in the description. They drew this incredible fan art of that Photoshop thing that I did for last episode's review. God bless you, this is just amazing. I'm using it as my profile picture on Facebook, so thank you. It's amazing. I love you so much for that. And also, while not technically fan art, I have to also give a shout out to Alright Talks on YouTube for this really funny, just photoshopped picture that it made me laugh, and I wanted to share it with you guys. I love this stuff so much, so thank you both so much for this. And finally, I've been trying to find an excuse to show this picture in one of my reviews for a couple weeks now, but one of my commenters, Harui, in the comments on YouTube, while not technically associated with my review series, drew this amazing fan art of Phos and Antarcticite way back and showed it to me and shared it with the rest of us. I feel like not enough people saw that in the comments, so I'm sharing it here. It's a wonderful picture. I'm linking her DeviantArt in the description as well. So again, sorry if I spent too much time on this for people who just want to see the review, but I have to give a shout out and say thank you to all three of those people, and to Nullgator for the soundtrack. I love you all. Thank you for keeping me informed, sending me fun pictures, and just being really cool parts of the community. I'm so fortunate to have you guys. And this goes to anybody who sends me pictures, who puts any effort to show me other things, keep me informed. Just thank you. Thank you so much. I love you. With all of that out of the way, let's get into this very special episode of Houseki no Kuni, Episode 12, the finale of the first season. Let's pray that we get a season 2. I will talk about that, but let's get into this. I'm so ready. Once again, Houseki just subverts all my expectations going in and delivers an episode that I was never expecting at all. A lot of story beats, tone changes. Houseki always ends up doing what I least expect, and it usually just makes it so much more surprising and engaging for me, and that is the case with this finale. Before we go into what subverted the expectations in this episode, I have to say that before watching it, I was made aware that there is some weird things going on in this versus what happened in the manga canonically. There's some anime original content, and I heard that there's some skipping around chapters, there's some cut content. I've heard a lot of things. And after watching the episode, I can probably make out what is anime original content, what was skipped around, what scenes were rearranged. I think I can tell, but I wouldn't say it was a flaw or that it was noticeable enough for it to be distracting and take me out of the episode and the story that they're telling. In fact, for a finale to this series, I believe that skipping ahead to what I believe is further ahead in the manga, I think it was a very wise decision to do that. Otherwise, there really wouldn't have been much of substance in this episode, in my opinion. And even with that stuff that I think we skipped ahead to get to, it was a very subtle final episode. That's the thing that I take away from this episode the most. It was a very nuanced and low-key way of ending the series. I definitely wouldn't go so far as to say that it was unsatisfactory. Far from it. I think that in this case, I think that the way things were quote-unquote wrapped up in this episode only makes me more interested in where the story is going from here on out. So while it definitely wasn't on that climactic and emotional level like, say, the Made in Abyss finale was, I think it was very fitting to the story that this season was telling. I think you could almost consider this the prologue of the true story that's about to unfold, as we now have a main purpose for Phos and now Cinnabar, and we're learning some very, very interesting revelations about the world. On top of all that, you really do get this melancholic yet satisfying tone where we see all these callbacks during the episode back to episode 1 and some other previous episodes. We just see how far we've come in this story, not just through Phos, but the other characters as well. I thought it was a really nice touch, all of the shots that we see that are taken straight from episode 1. We even see a shot of episode 1 Phos versus what current Phos looks like, and it's just so apparent how much has changed. Which is why I don't understand the complaints that I've seen people have after this episode. The fact that we haven't really gone anywhere in 12 episodes. I would completely disagree with that. Just because we've stayed in this one location doesn't mean that these 12 episodes have been uneventful at all. The bulk of the story has been told through these characters developing and the way their interactions have changed. Characters have completely different relationships with each other than what they had at the beginning. Let's start getting into the details about this episode and what made it so interesting and engaging for me personally, and easily, the two aspects that made this episode as good as it was for me are in fact the sequences that I believe were skipped ahead to in order to end this final episode off on a substantial note. And I believe those sequences are Phos communicating with the Lunarians and then Phos teaming up with Cinnabar. I love that they cut ahead to these events because it makes me feel, after watching this episode, I just get such a sense of this whole season being a prologue to what's truly coming next. The grand plot of Phos trying to figure out the secrets of the Lunarians with Cinnabar at her side. Which is why I have not given up hope for a season 2. In fact, I feel like this ending basically guarantees that we'll be getting a season 2 if the desire is there, which, judging by the reception in Japan, it definitely is. Now, I'm not going to say this season 2 is coming anytime soon, but the fact that they ended it this way tells me that they have plans to continue this story, which I am so happy about. Before I watched the episode and I heard talks of this anime original ending, anime original scenes, I was getting scared. I was like, what? How do you end this series at this point? You should have built up this anime original ending a couple episodes ago if that's where you wanted to go with it. There's not any room to end this series in one episode. And thankfully there wasn't. They clearly leave it an open ending to hopefully one day continue this story. My favorite aspect about this episode was easily the Cinnabar focus that we got. The entire series, practically, it feels like, I have been begging for more Cinnabar screen time. For one of our main characters, it feels like she's gotten next to nothing in terms of screen time with the rest of the cast. I think she's even below Bort at this point. So to see this entire sequence dedicated to Cinnabar and Phos's interactions with Cinnabar was amazing. I enjoyed that Phos was so preoccupied with everything that she was doing and her desire to learn about the Lunarians that she actually momentarily forgot about her promise to Cinnabar. When it's brought up to her new work, she questions it. She's like, what? New work? And it makes sense that Phos wouldn't necessarily be thinking about this at this time because of everything else that she's been going through. But I love that the main motivation and the main goal that Phos had set for herself from episode 1, she's almost lost sight of. And in contrast to that, we learn that Cinnabar has never forgotten that promise. As she's about to go out for her patrol, we see that Cinnabar still has the encyclopedia that Phos had in episode 1. And not only that, but Cinnabar remembers exactly what Phos promised her. Not just new work, but better new work. So when Phos proposes that they team up to learn about the Lunarians, it's just this incredibly sweet and heartwarming interaction between the two. All these callbacks to episode 1, all these callbacks to how their relationship has slowly developed over the brief interactions that they've had. It's just wonderful, and it almost practically made the episode in itself for me. The fact that we now have this Phos and Cinnabar team up is amazing, and I cannot wait to see how this relationship and these interactions continue in the future. We're finally going to get more Cinnabar screen time, just them together, and that's terrific because that's been some of my favorite interactions and dialogue in the entire series is these two talking. So the fact that we now have these two together permanently as partners is just amazing, and is probably the main reason why I'm excited to continue this story and see where these characters go from here just for this team up. The other huge point of interest that really made this finale for me are the plot revelations that we get regarding the Lunarians, and it's not much. It's definitely not much, but what is there is just so intriguing and so inviting just to beg you into learning more, reading that manga, finding out what happens next. Phos fully acts on her desire to learn about the Lunarians and ask the Lunarians for information, and eventually confronts a sunspot that she finds, grabs a Lunarian, traps it inside the gold alloys so that they won't be disturbed, and she tries to talk to it. And what happens next probably garnered the biggest reaction from me out of this entire episode. We see that the longer Phos holds on to this Lunarian, the more it struggles to break free. But at the very end, we see pupils form in those blank eyes that used to be, and we hear one syllable spoken from this Lunarian. Fa. Fa. It was an F. That's all we know. It is then killed by Cinnabar shortly thereafter, but this just raises so many questions about the Lunarians and what they actually are. I've speculated from the beginning that these Lunarians were some kind of hive mind, and that they didn't really have a will of their own, and that maybe they were being controlled by some mastermind on the moon. But this proves that they have their own consciousness. In fact, if being held hostage for that long is what made this Lunarian turn, I wonder if they're actually maybe even being controlled or mind controlled by whoever's on this moon. It would explain why they grew pupils after being held for that long. Maybe they're starting to regain their consciousness that they lost to this hive mind. If that's the case, who is controlling these people? For some reason, it's hard for me to believe that it's just some random Lunarian that's controlling other Lunarians. I feel like these Lunarians are possibly being controlled by an outside party. It also raises the question if we would be able to communicate with the Lunarian if we actually had that time without somebody killing them. And it also raises the question if Phos would be the only one who understands these Lunarians. She's able to talk to the Admirabilis. I wonder if that would extend to the Lunarians, and otherwise nobody would be able to understand what they're saying. And finally, I wonder what that F stands for. I wonder what it means. What was this Lunarian trying to communicate to Phos at that time? So many questions, so much intrigue just from this one sequence, maybe 1 minute of the actual episode. That is brilliant setup, and I am very happy that they cut ahead to this moment in the final episode because it makes the story that much more exciting and engaging for me. It feels like this is the first major plot revelation we've had in quite some time, other than Sensei possibly being connected to the Lunarians. Although I feel like that was heavily hinted at throughout the series, this is just something out of left field. Where is this coming from? At the end of last episode, we were introduced to a new gym, a new character called Patpaw, or as some of you called her in the comments, Patpaw, which is what I'm going to call her. We get a very brief amount of screen time with this character at the beginning of this episode, and as a lot of you told me in the comments last episode, the reason why they introduced Patpaw is for Phos to try to question her about the Lunarians and about her overall plan to communicate with the Lunarians and learn their secrets. So I will admit that it made sense to introduce Patpaw last episode. It made sense, it was relevant. I just wish that Phos had talked about it more naturally to bring it up at that time, and I wish it was foreshadowed more in the actual series. Maybe name drop her a few times just so we know she exists. Either way though, this character is very interesting, and I think the most interesting aspect about her that I saw in this episode is that she almost feels like a villain. Not just her voice actress, but the way that she's talking to Phos feels very antagonist-y. And I love that because we really haven't had a straight up antagonistic gym in the group. Maybe Bort, but that doesn't really count. We know Bort is more strict than just straight up evil. But I was getting straight up evil vibes from Patpaw in this episode. Are the chances of her being evil actually that high? Probably not. I'm just saying that I was getting those vibes from her talking to Phos. And I also find it very interesting that other than Cinnabar, the only gym in the entire group that knows what Phos is going out to do, setting out on her journey to find answers, they're in a coma, so they can't tell anyone or do anything. And now that Patpaw is back in a coma, presumably for another 200 plus years, Rutiel is back to trying to fix her again. So poor Rutiel, for real. Those are the big things I wanted to discuss, but there are some smaller notes that I would like to make about the episode as well that I observed. For one, Daya and Bort are no longer teamed up. What the fuck? When Phos suggested to Sensei that everybody should be given a chance to team up with Bort, I thought it was just a learning experience. I thought that it was just a reason for all of the other gyms to get that experience working with somebody who is that brilliant in battle. But no, the way they make it out in this episode, Bort is looking for a new potential partner. You're kidding me! Team back up with Daya right now, you bastard! The way that they portray it in this episode too makes it seem as if Zircon will be Bort's new partner, which also leaves Yellow on the sidelines. I love that we get some continuation to Yellow's development that we got way back in episode 6 when she was first introduced. You can tell that it pains her that Zircon is now working with Bort, and that Zircon is probably learning a lot more from Bort than he ever would have from Yellow. But Yellow accepts it because she just doesn't want to be responsible for another death. We have to remember that she's lost, I think, 3 gyms that have partnered up with her to the Lunarians. She doesn't want to be responsible for another one. So if I had to guess, I would say that Bort and Zircon as a pair are going to be the new team up moving forward. I could also see Yellow and Daya teaming up as a new pair as well. 1, because they only have each other at this point, and 2, they really get along. Daya loves Yellow. Yellow's essentially a big brother to Daya, so it makes sense. They're both the diamond class. That team up works. As for cut content in these chapters that I heard about, I feel like maybe they cut out a few of the other auditions, I guess you could call them, with Bort and other members of the gyms working together and just not working out. I could see that being cut content, and I'm fine with it. I'm fine with just skipping to, okay, here's Bort and Zircon. They're working well together. They'll make a good pair. And finally, one last note that I wanted to make. I love that we got some Alexandrite development in this episode. We got some very comedy focused scenes as well. They were very funny with Alex Sensei. But I really enjoyed learning the reason why she's so obsessed with the Lunarians. The reason that she's obsessed with learning more and more about them. It's because she hates them. Up until this point, it almost seemed like she loved the Lunarians. But no, she hates them, and she wants to learn more and constantly figure out more about what they are because she never wants to forget that hatred. Apparently, she lost a gem to them as well. I think their name was Chrysoberyl. So I really enjoyed that development for Alex. And speaking of lost gems, I wonder if we'll ever see how many full gems there were in the past. I'm not sure if the 28 gems refers to them all, even the ones that were taken, or just the ones that are left. And I wonder if it is just the ones that are left, how many extra gems are up there on the moon that were taken. I know I could probably figure that out by counting, but come on, I'm lazy. And speaking of gems that we haven't seen yet, there is a gem in the flashback regarding Phos that I believe we haven't seen at this point in time. It was a yellow-headed gem, and I don't think it was Yellow Diamond. It was somebody else. A voice that sounded unfamiliar to me. And I wonder if it was one of the gems that was taken before the beginning of the series. In fact, in episode 1, we see the Lunarian shooting arrows filled with yellow gems. I wonder if that's her. If so, that's pretty fucked up. And another callback to episode 1 that I didn't even realize. But it's sad to say that that is all I have to talk about in this episode of Houseki no Kuni. I don't want it to be over. Oh man, this is gonna suck. Going each Saturday without my Houseki, it's not gonna feel right at all. This has been such an incredible experience. Beginning to end, every single episode was just fantastic. At the very worst, it was only great and not fantastic. That's the makings of just a wonderful series right there. I am so blessed that I decided to pick up this and decide to review it weekly. I have had so much fun talking to you guys. All the new subscribers and people that came in because of this series, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. It was incredible. It was amazing, and I still stick by what I said. This is easily my favorite show of the year. It has my favorite visuals, my favorite animation of the year. It has my second favorite OST of the year. Any other year where Made in Abyss doesn't exist, this probably would have been my favorite OST of the year. But this OST was incredible, and I'm just constantly reminded of that as I listen to these tracks that came with the manga. And it just was a wonderful showcase of how you do character development and character interactions. Phos is up there as probably my favorite character of the year. I think I could say that. It's between her and Reg. And despite what some people might say, I've loved the story from beginning to end. I think the characters were a vessel for the story versus needing some kind of huge, expansive narrative. I still don't agree that nothing happened in this season. A ton happened, and it was all driven by the characters. Throughout the series, people told me that the story only got more and more melancholic and sad, and while I do agree that it did reach those levels, while I was making that intro, I just realized how fun this show has been. How much of a joyful experience going along with Phos through all of these experiences was. And not all of it was happy, but when I look back on it, it was just a really emotional and wonderful experience. And I know this is getting cheesy, but I really just have to say thank you guys again for joining me on this review series. It's been so fun. I've seen more Houseki videos popping up over the course of this series running, and I'm very happy that I wasn't the only one talking about this series, and I hope that more people continue to talk about this series even after it's over, because I feel like just everybody needs to experience this and at least give it a shot. As for manga reviews, if you've been looking in the comments, you'll know that I have been promising that I will start reviewing the manga, start reading the manga after this season is over, barring that a season 2 was announced, which it wasn't. So I am saying that I will be starting to read and review the manga from now on. I am so looking forward to getting into this story, learning about what's going to happen next. A lot of you have been saying that it only gets better and better from here, which makes me even more excited. I don't plan on starting it immediately as much as I want to. I can't do 2 manga reviews at once, I just don't have the time right now. So I will start reviewing the Houseki no Kuni manga after I'm caught up with Made in Abyss. As far as I know, there's only 4 chapters for me to read of Made in Abyss left, so expect the first Houseki no Kuni manga review to be sometime next month, probably towards the latter half of next month, either that or the beginning of February. I'm not good at math. It's 5 weeks. 5 weeks from now will probably be the first Houseki no Kuni manga review, just to give you guys that time estimate there. So again, thank you for all of the support, all of the comments, all of the likes, for supporting me as a content creator. I see some of you guys on Reddit just talking about me and how I'm covering this series and how I'm good at it. It just makes me unbelievably happy. I can't even describe how happy that makes me, seeing you guys enjoying my reviews to that degree. So with that, I hope you all have a Merry Christmas, and of course, as usual, have a good day.